I'd sort of dragged myself out of bed and walk into the train station, and I was just dreading having to go into the office and put on that sort of exterior that everything was fine when it wasn't. On my walk to work, I just noticed there was just like a little flower on the side of the path. It was as simple as just sort of noticing it and thinking, oh wow, that's really pretty. And then all of a sudden I thought, hang on a minute, that sort of almost broke the negative thought patterns. And I was like, I just had a positive thought, and actually seeing that flower has made me feel a little bit happier. Even though it's only for a split second, it still made me feel happier. So then I sort of started to think, actually, this is what I need to do. So on my walks to work, following that, I used to try and see what else I could notice, just as a way of breaking the thought patterns. And then that sort of very quickly translated into my own garden, because I was like, right, I've got access to a green space right outside my back door. I should be doing a bit more of this.
People don't often think about the amount of movement that they do when they're out in their gardens all day. There's so much benefit physically from gardening, but I would agree there's almost more benefit mentally. This week is Mental Health Awareness Week, and this year's theme is movement, moving more for our mental health. Lucy at mindful.gardener on Instagram got in touch and asked if we could collaborate, so I jumped at the chance. We both agree that gardening is one of the best forms of movement for our mental health, and Lucy is so passionate about this that she's created this community on Instagram to inspire and encourage others to pick up their trowels. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, as you'll hear, that ranged from the importance of touching the soil, ideas for starting gardening when you don't have one, to the benefits of joining a community garden project to share your passion in gardening or to get started for the first time. I started our conversation by asking about the physical benefits.
To be honest, gardening is just brilliant for physically. I think it burns calories for one thing, which is awesome. Apparently, half an hour's worth of gardening, I think, burns something like 300 calories. So, you know, I was quite shocked at that. So it's, you know, as good as going to the gym as far as I'm concerned. But, and I think, you know, it helps to sort of keep you active. It helps ward off a lot of other physical conditions. It reduces sort of heart conditions. Stroke is another one, I think, you know. So there's a lot of benefits to sort of the physical side of it. And obviously that's sort of, I always think it's quite intrinsically linked with the mental side of it. So if you're physically feeling fit, you know, you sort of mentally, that's sort of not getting you know, there's nothing worse than feeling physically unwell. It really sort of lowers your mood as well. So I think it sort of all ties in with that. But
and it's a nice sort of starter, you know, it's a more gentle way. You're not kind of blasting your body with something very suddenly. It's more gentle, it's lower impact, and it's at the pace that you want to take it, isn't it? So actually your gardening could be very more gentle if you want it to be, where it's sort of more nourishing versus, you know, a lot of heavy lifting involved.
Yeah,
a lot of, you know, digging.
There's just like a range of movements, isn't there? So you've obviously got the more physical side of it, the digging, the lifting, and then you've got sort of down to sort of things like your seed sowing, your deadheading. So, you know, things that sort of aren't quite as taxing. And I think, you know, the great thing about it is that people can just sort of do as much or as little as they want. If they want to do the more physical side of it, they can. If they don't, if they just want to potter around. So I think certainly as you get older, I think it's a great way of sort of keeping mobile, but without sort of really sort of putting like heavy impact on your body.
I think often if I am contacted by gardeners or my gardening people in my family, we talk about the sort of the physical poses that you create when you're gardening, because some of them can be quite challenging if you're not used to doing that anyway. So the advice that I always give people who are and want to keep gardening is about how you should replicate your sort of outdoor poses that you want to do that are more of a struggle when you're inside, in fact. So the whole getting down to the ground, you know, I talk about this a lot, getting down to the ground and back up can become a challenge if you don't do it nice and regularly through your day. But gardening is the perfect way to add that in. But I always find that if I'm weeding or something and it's repetitive and I'm not moving too much in one area, I have to make sure that I mix up the way that I get low, and the sort of shapes that I create with my body to do that, to make sure that I don't kind of get into that stuck pattern. So just on the physical side, I always think that's worth saying. It's always about mixing up your movements rather than, again, getting sort of stuck.
Definitely, because I think it's quite easy. There's a lot of jobs, like you said, with the weeding. The weeding is definitely one that you can get stuck there for quite, if you've got a lot of weeds, especially. But so I think, and it's just reminding people to sort of get up. I'm guilty of it. I not moving as much, sort of working on one patch, and then you just sort of you get up and does nothing for your back.
Yeah, exactly. So it's being really mindful of the fact that you can hopefully kneel using a kneeling pad. You can try to squat. You can have your, often people wouldn't think about putting their heels up on something when they're trying to squat, when they're weeding, because if they can't do it on dry land, as it were, on the soil, you're going to have that movement, and you don't want to. Someone messaged me about toppling over in their border the other day, which was very funny. You don't want to be doing that, particularly in the front garden, as she said.
No, definitely not.
But there's lots of different ways of adding it in. So Lucy, we are here because you got in touch with me to say, I would love us to do a collaboration, because coming up in May, which is in fact this week, is Mental Health Awareness Week. And I was really excited and got back to you straight away because, as you prompted me, the theme this year is moving more for our mental health. And I just think this is such a key topic. Now, we've just talked about all the ways that you can add in movement by gardening, and at a lovely, accessible way. But I'd like to talk a bit more about the mental health side of things. Now, gardening is a hobby of mine, but it's been very important to members of my family for mental health reasons to gain all the benefits that you can from gardening. And we're going to talk about that. But tell me, how long have you been gardening?
I have been gardening, proper gardening, I'd say. I say sort of seriously gardening. Probably started when I moved into my first house. So I'd say about 25, 26 was when I sort of started. I did little bits when I lived with my mum. My mum's a very keen gardener, so when I lived with my mum and dad, little bits, but not on a regular basis.
Right. Okay. And then what started to shift you to think that this is something that you could do in your life? A bit more of, I should
think,
say.
I think, to be honest with you, I just realised I suffer with my mental health, depression, anxiety, low self-esteem. I've got a list as long as your arm, and I've suffered with that on and off since my late teens, really. So to be honest with you, it wasn't actually the connection I sort of made, first of all, wasn't necessarily with the garden. It was more with nature and being outdoors, I'd say. I was suffering, I went through a particularly bad bout of depression when I was in my sort of late 20s. And mid to late 20s, I'd say. It's very blurry. It was a long time ago. But I went through that, and I remember at the time I was working in Birmingham, and I used to walk to the station. I used to catch the train, and I was in such a bad, it was a real struggle at that point to sort of get up and just function on a day-to-day basis. And I'd sort of dragged myself out of bed and walk into the train station, and I was just dreading having to go into the office and put on that sort of exterior that everything was fine when it wasn't. And I on my walk to work, I just noticed just a little, I have to walk down a sort of little lane, and I just noticed there was just like a little flower on the side of the path, and I just sort of noticed it, and I just sort of, it was as simple as just sort of noticing it and thinking, oh wow, that's really pretty. And then all of a sudden I thought, hang on a minute, I've literally, that sort of almost broke the negative thought patterns. And I was
Absolutely.
like, I've just had a positive thought, and actually seeing that flower has made me feel a little bit happier. Even though it's only for a split second, it still made me feel happier. So then I sort of started to think, actually, this is what I need to do. So on my walks to work, following that, I used to try and see what else I could notice, and just as a way of breaking the thought patterns. And then that sort of very quickly translated into my own garden, because I was like, right, I've got access to a green space right outside my back door. I should be doing a bit more of this. And then it's just sort of snowballed from there, really.
Yeah, little pockets of joy are flower. I mean, especially when you're looking for all the different colors, the shapes, how things are changing. It's
Absolutely.
There's a wealth of it out there. But like you said, you tuned into that.
Yeah.
You noticed that, probably because it was such a, as you described, sort of sea of darkness, that having that one little moment of joy felt so unusual in a way that it surprised you, which that's fantastic. But I suppose you can force that, though, can't you, if you see what I mean? So to search definitely for joy and to think, I think I quite like flowers, to actually sort of hone in on it would be quite useful, wouldn't it? To be able to try and sort of flex that muscle in a way.
And as I say, even though it's only for a split second and I went back to feeling quite rubbish afterwards, it was a relief, because you're sort of getting out of your own mindset, you're out of your own brain. And sometimes you can feel like, when you suffer with depression, or certainly this is how I feel, like sometimes you can get very trapped inside your own head, and it almost becomes, you feel a little bit like you're imprisoned by it. So it's that sort of relief of, like, just for a split second. So that's why I then sort of thought, right, the more I do it, the more of these thoughts, the more positive thoughts are going to come in, and hopefully then that will sort of outweigh the negative.
No, that's brilliant. It's very and it's very inspiring, because it's something that's quite easy to do when it's around you, but it's like we're saying, you kind of have to work at it, and you chose to then say, okay, I want more of this. If this is a way I can deal with it, I want more of it, which is brilliant. So at what point, so you're called the Mindful Gardener, Mindful Gardener on Instagram.
That's right.
Which is a platform on which you choose to share about inspiration for gardening, but also you do discuss mental health and the benefits of gardening for mental health. So can you tell us a little bit about the benefits that you find from regularly gardening and getting outside to do it?
I think, to be honest with you, I try and practice what's called mindful gardening, which is essentially what I've just described, really, sort of trying to it's the ability to sort of train your brain to sort of tune the background out, and sort of really focus on the present, the task that you're doing in the garden or what's around you. And I think being in a garden is a very sort of sensory experience anyway. There's a lots of sights, sounds and smells in a garden, so it is good from a mental health perspective. But I think sort of regularly gardening, there's a lot of sort of gardening jobs as well that are very sort of repetitive. So things like your weeding, your pruning, your deadheading, even sowing seed, which really help to sort of reduce, if you are an anxious person or you're suffering with anxiety, really helps to sort of slow the brain down, and you're almost like switching off autopilot, really. That's how I feel when I garden. It's sort of
you're making me think of meditative effect of a repeated action that you're really focusing in on.
That's it. And it takes a while to sort of do it. And even now, sometimes, I mean, everyone's got busy lives, and inevitably the thoughts will sort of start creeping back in. And at first I used to sort of really beat myself up about it and think, actually, I'm doing this wrong. This is, this isn't working. But actually it's about sort of realizing that, those thoughts will creep back in. We're only human. Thoughts will sort of come and go. But when that happens, it's trying to sort of bring yourself back to the present every time. And you might have to do that 3, 4, 5 times during a gardening session. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that you are sort of bringing yourself back and focusing on the present.
No, that makes absolute sense. And you're right. I think, coming back to meditation, a lot of people talk about, I can't meditate because the thoughts just keep coming. And yet I've learned that the point of that is to sort of acknowledge the thoughts, and then, as you say, pull away and sort of almost watch them and make yourself separate to them, which is exactly what you're saying. And the reason probably that meditation is so hard to do is because you're not doing something, whereas what you're talking about is you've got a focus, a purpose, you're improving a situation by, you know, making that bed look nice with less weeds or whatever the thing is. But at the same time acknowledging I am going to keep having thoughts, as you say, because you're human, but that it's going to keep happening. So it's being able to deal with the thoughts and know that the thoughts are not you, they're thoughts.
Absolutely. And I think it's like anything, it's a practice at the end of the day. Mindful gardening is a practice, meditation is a practice, and practice by the definition is something that you keep doing to try and improve things. So, you know, that you shouldn't sort of worry if you're not doing it right, because there is no sort of right or wrong. You just have to sort of keep going, keep bringing your mind back, and that's sort of what I've learned along the way, really, is to sort of not chastise yourself if you have the thoughts, because, you know, as long as you sort of keep going and keep bringing yourself back, and actually the more that you do that you get better at doing it because you are practicing it. So you do tend to have then generally less thoughts during that session. But yeah, it doesn't matter if you have, you know, like I say, if you have to do that 4 or 5 times, it, you know.
And I'm sure that then has a beneficial effect the rest of the time. So when you're not gardening, because as you say, you're kind of practicing that and becoming aware that, you know, being able to be mindful of the thing you're doing right now is going to help you to distract from it. So it's great advice. It makes a lot of sense to me. And obviously with gardening, one of the, I mean, you can garden indoors in terms of plants and so on, which, you know, is really beneficial. But also the getting outdoors and that effect of being in nature.
Definitely.
And, you know, touching the soil and so on. What are those, how do those things benefit you?
Well, to be honest with you, soil actually is an antidepressant, which is quite a good little fact that people may not know. There's microbacterium within the soil that actually is known to sort of have, I think it sort of has a similar effect on mood as Prozac, the drug Prozac, apparently. Wow. So so it's a natural.
So getting your hands dirty.
So getting your hands dirty is good for you. There, you heard it here first.
Yes.
So so that it's always good to see. I mean, I do a mixture. Sometimes I garden with gloves, sometimes I don't. More so now, unfortunately, I do, just because I've got a skin condition on my hands. So if it's not too bad, then I always will try and get my fingers in. And there are some jobs that actually gloves can sort of get in the way a little bit, especially if you're sort of dealing with seeds, like very, very small seeds, very fine seeds. So they can become a bit sort of cumbersome then. But so I always do try and get my hands dirty when I can.
And I think if you haven't for a while, and it's something that makes you go, I'm not sure how I feel about that, then it's you know, it's worth giving it a go, isn't it? Just to see,
definitely.
Is it so bad, or actually is it quite nice because you're kind of connecting back with the earth, the soil, the ground.
And again, it's that in itself is such a sort of sensory experience, because obviously, you know, that the soil has that sort of earthy smell. So it's about sort of not just tuning into sort of, obviously you're getting your hands in and that's great, and with the natural antidepressant and everything, but you're sort of engaging all of your senses. So how does it feel? How does it smell? You know, how does it look?
Not how does it taste?
No, not how does it taste. I wouldn't recommend that one, no. No, but certainly engaging the other senses. Definitely.
Although it does remind me of making mud pies when I was younger. I used to love making mud pies, which, you know, in theory were, you know, to eat, but obviously you didn't.
No.
But that feeling, you know, of it really oozing and being gooey and lovely in your hands, it was a lovely thing. And I remember playing with chunks of moss from walls and things like that. And it's, why are we drawn to that as a child?
Yes.
For those reasons, ultimately.
Absolutely.
We sort of move around our world so much more innately when we're young.
Yeah.
And actually sort of replicating those kind of things that you did. Maybe you're not going to make mud pies, but gardening has that benefit. That's
Absolutely.
partly why it feels good, presumably.
Yeah, definitely.
So you've created your platform, and you've connected with other people through Instagram, which is one of the best bits about Instagram, is that sort of community feel, and people have connected with you. So I'd love it if you tell us a little bit about some of the volunteer projects that you've done, because obviously gardening can be done in isolation and still get lots of joy and benefit from that, but it's also a brilliant thing that connects people.
Yes, definitely. To be honest, that's another mental health benefit. It's a great activity for connecting people who maybe feel isolated or who are suffering from loneliness. I mean, that can be absolutely sort of devastating if you are in that sort of situation. There's a lot of sort of community gardens that you can that are local to people, or I actually also volunteer at the National Trust. National Trust are always looking for people, so if you've got a local National Trust near to you, I'm quite lucky that I do have quite a nice one that's not very far from me, so I volunteer on the gardens team there, and I also volunteer at a local community garden, which is literally I don't know, about 5 minutes down the road from me. So,
amazing.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about a couple of them, because also, so how does a community garden work, and so what do you all put into it?
So the community garden obviously is very different, and the National Trust is obviously because you're sort of volunteering for a big organisation, that's a lot more sort of structured, and they give you the opportunity there. Actually, if you learn quite a broad range of skills, because you're sort of learning under a head gardener or a team of gardeners, and they give you the opportunity there to if you want to sort of learn about how to operate certain garden machinery, they'll do the training on that. But what I love about volunteering for them is you never know what you'll sort of sign up for a session, but you never know what you're going to be doing. Some days you can be weeding like a formal border, other days you're in like the arboretum and you're chopping something down, other days you're dredging the river that runs through the estate for weeds. So there's such a broad range of things that they do,
and you probably learn a lot.
You do. You learn an awful lot. I'm lucky enough. There's a team of, I'd say, there's a head gardener there where I volunteer at Shugborough Estate. So there's a head gardener there, and there's I'd say about 3 others that I'd sort of say are the deputies, but they've all got between them just an absolute wealth of knowledge. Certainly the one chap there, he's been on the estate for years, and he knows the estate inside out. He knows all the plants on the estate. So it's amazing. The community garden, much a smaller affair, but just is equally as satisfying, to be honest, because we turned a disused space outside. It's an old it's a shop, it's an eco shop, so it's sort of sold lots of sort of eco cleaning products and cosmetics and that sort of thing, and they just had like some disused space outside. So it started a few years ago, and they just stuck a couple of raised beds outside the back door, and then there was a local lady that came and made a living willow arch, and it's just sort of taken off from there, really. And we've built it up to, we've got a sort of regular team of volunteers. We've just done a project down there where we've turned the area by the willow arch, which was just a bit of scrubland, into a wildflower meadow. So we've just sown that back in March. So hopefully that's going to look amazing. We've repurposed all the turf from there and built a turf seat at the end, so that people will be able to sit by the wildflower meadow. We've
lovely.
got a well-being border there. We're going to create some sensory borders there, and then we've got now the local college, a class of the kids from there. They come every Friday and they sort of volunteer with us, and we also have some people from a group called Changes. They're a sort of local mental health support group, so they also come down as well.
Oh, that's a top tip. So let's link that in the show notes. You said Changes. What about if people want to try and find a community garden opportunity, a project near them, and feel like that's something they want to get involved in? Do you know of any organisations?
There's a website that's called Good to Grow. They've got a map. If you sort of go onto their website, they've got a map, and they sort of have all the community garden projects on there that you can go and have a look. But it's also, I always think it's also worth looking in your sort of local newspapers or online local news, because usually these sorts of places are advertised as well.
Yeah, I suppose local Facebook group, that is probably that kind of place that it would be.
Yeah, absolutely. We've certainly got a local Facebook group for ours. I know that much. And also an Instagram account for it as well. So it's always worth having a quick look, or just Googling community gardens in your area and seeing what comes up. But the Good to Grow definitely, I know, has a map on there that you can go on and check out. Yeah.
Well, we'll link to that as well. But if that makes someone think, actually, that might be a nice way in, but they're thinking, well, I'm not a gardener though. So what skills would I bring? How would you encourage them to go for it?
I'd say, I think it's sometimes, I think gardening, there's that sort of like image that you have to, have lots of horticultural knowledge, and you have to have a qualifications and this, that, and the other. You don't at all. You just turn up and give it a go. I'd always recommend you just turn up and give it a go, because you can be the most experienced gardener in the world, and you're still going to have things that will go slightly awry, because that's just the way it is. You're working with Mother Nature, who is very unpredictable, as we all know. So
yes,
I think you don't need to have experience, and there's always people at these sorts of community gardens, and certainly if you go somewhere like the National Trust, where people that have got experience, so you can just ask what you need to know, and people will show you how to do it. And we've got a team of volunteers at the community garden that have been volunteering. So there's me and sort of 3 or 4 others that have been going for quite a while. So we're now in the process of, when the kids come down, we're sort of showing the kids how to do certain things. I was dividing plants with them last week, just to sort of show them, actually, here's how to make free plants. So just
exactly.
something that they might not necessarily know, but it's I'd say don't let that hold you back. Always just come and give it a go. You will have things that will go wrong, but equally you will also have things that will go right. And the things that go right, you get such a sense of achievement. I still get it now when I sow a seed and it germinates. I'm like, I did that.
Yeah.
That plant is growing because of me, because I've looked after it, I've nurtured it, and right from the word go, and then from seeing it from germination right the way through to it blooming in your garden, it's just an amazing feeling, and that certainly outweighs the failures. And I think the more you garden, you start to just sort of chalk up the failures, and you learn from it, and then you move on.
But you're right. There's learning from the failures, because you could have done something slightly better or differently, but then you can do everything perfectly. And as you say, Mother Nature throws in the curveball of weather.
Yeah.
And what grew beautifully last year doesn't even show its head.
No.
And but perhaps that's also a really key part in terms of your mental health, that you accept that things are not always going to go the way that you planned. You accept that things are going to change always, and therefore knowing that change is always going to happen is maybe quite beneficial just for life. But I also love the start to finish. I've grown a few things from seed, and my mum's really encouraged me, and she's even given me little teeny plants to pretend I nearly have. And I have absolutely loved that. And bulbs for me, I love the fact that you sow, you plant at one point, and then this, a few months later, this joy just comes out. I'm still loving my tulips. They're still strong, and every time I see them, I get the feeling that you mentioned before on your walk to work, the little bit of joy, but also knowing, as you say, I did that. And you know, I've only been gardening for a few years, and I'm tinkering at it, and I'm trying to do more. But I already have that feeling, even though I'm pretty not good. I'm okay at it. I don't want to say that I'm bad, because I just think it's pointless saying that. I'm not great at it, but I'm trying and I'm getting some results, and that's the main thing, isn't it?
That is the main thing. I mean, like I said, I've been gardening for 15 years now, something like that, properly gardening, and I still have. I made a well-being board down at the community garden, and I put this for spring. I put tulips, alliums, I put daffodils in. The daffodils, not one of them has come up.
No,
I don't know why. Because I did everything right.
Yeah,
it just didn't.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just one of those things. But I thought, okay, that's a little bit disappointing. They would have looked nice, but the tulips still look really lovely. So, you know, there's just sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes it can be something that you've done, and I do still make plenty of mistakes on things like leaving my seedlings out, forgetting to shut my greenhouse and things like that, and you know, so
for me it's forgetting to water.
Yes, well, that's the other thing, you forget to water until it looks a bit droopy. I did it yesterday. My seedlings, I sort of put them out, hardened them off, and then because it was quite nice weather, they were bone dry, and I was like, oh my, quick, I'm going to water them.
Come back to life.
You do, because again, it's one of those, you've got busy lives, and sometimes these things sort of, but you know, quite often they will bounce back if they've not gone to the point of no return. And I always try and sort of rescue them anyway, and I just think, you know, we'll try and bring it back. If not, you know, then we move on. But quite often you can bring things back. So
it's about progress, not perfection.
Absolutely.
That's the mantra that I hold on to from many things in my life.
Absolutely.
And definitely applies to gardening.
Very much believe. I don't really think that there's such a thing as perfection in gardening, because there can't. It's going back to Mother Nature. There can't be, because ultimately, you know, there is always that element of Mother Nature and the unpredictability, especially these days with the climate, with the way it is, and you know, things sort of flowering when they're not supposed to be flowering, and or coming out too early, and then we have a cold snap and everything. Just, you know, so
and obviously, you know, this time of year it's lighter for longer, it's getting warmer and so on. But how do you, because obviously mental health can often be quite a struggle for people in the darker months, in the winter months, the colder months. How do you sort of keep things going at that time of year?
So I always make sure I still get myself outside. So that's the first thing. Wrap up warm and get get yourself out. I like to do what I call a little garden wander. So I'll go out sort of maybe for 5 minutes a day, and I just have a little circuit around my garden, and I try and have a look at what's new in the garden. And a lot of people are probably thinking in the winter there's not a fat lot, but you've still got, if you look very closely, there's still things that are going on in the winter. So you've still got, if you've got evergreen plants in your garden, winter interest, there's lots of plants that you can grow for winter interest. Dogwood's cornice are brilliant for that. They have beautiful, like, bright red, or you can get orange ones. The stems are sort of really bright.
Oh yes,
so
I know what you mean.
Sort of so sort of looking for those sorts of things. I always think as well, trees for me are a big thing. I think I love trees. I think they're absolutely beautiful, and I think they're massively underrated. I think a lot of people sort of choose flowers maybe over trees, but I love trees. And I think sometimes you see trees in the summer, and they look beautiful, but you can really appreciate the form in the winter because there's no leaves. So you can really appreciate how the bark looks, how the branches looks, what the shape is like. And I just sort of try and sort of tune into those sorts of things, really. Little gardening jobs as well. There's still things that you can do in the winter. I always make sure that I'm doing little jobs like topping my bird feeders up, cleaning the water baths out, making sure you sort of, if it's iced over, breaking the ice off, things like that, because you still want to sort of encourage wildlife into your garden at that time of the year, because that's again, a sort of big part of mindful gardening. Wildlife and watching wildlife really does help sort of to lower those stress levels. So it's just sort of keeping up with the little jobs like that, really, and use the time for planning as well. Plan what you're going to sow in the summer.
Well, and the bulbs as well. You've got to do them sort of November, December, haven't you? If you want them to come up in the early months, which are the first pockets of joy to come through that you're kind of eagerly waiting for. But you need to have done that in the colder times.
Definitely, and that is for me, I'd say probably up there as one of my favourite garden jobs. I love springtime and I love spring bulbs, just spring flowers. I absolutely adore them. So I love doing my spring bulbs.
It's just that colour, isn't it, coming through? The different shapes, different heights. It just brings so much at a point where things are seeming to be lacking in colour. So I love the fact that you reference some winter plants, that because I notice them always, those lovely coloured sort of bright red stems, and they can be like a burst of flames almost. They look so fantastic. And there's lots of different things like that when you wander around and have a good spy at other people's gardens, you can see. So and my mum focuses on that, trying to have as many things as she can through the winter as well. Yeah,
it's always worth adding. I think it's easy to forget about sort of plants for the winter, and most people assume that once the summer's done and dusted, that's it for planting, but it really isn't the case. And there are some really lovely winter plants. Witch hazel's another one of my favourites. It flowers in the winter months. It's sort of very sort of spidery yellow flowers, but they're very fragrant as well, and you can get varieties that have got orange flowers as well and sort of reddish flowers, but they're beautiful as well. So it's definitely worth thinking about planning
ahead. No, I would definitely agree, and I think I definitely need more of that in my garden for sure. So also have you got any tips for people who are don't have a garden and who would like to try gardening? Perhaps they're in an inner city or whatever. Obviously we've talked about community projects they could join, but what if they just want to have a go themselves because they're not quite ready for the community project side of things?
I think I always say you don't need to have a garden to enjoy gardening. As long as you've got a windowsill or access to a window for a bit of light, you can grow an enormous amount of things indoors. Indoor plants, a lot of people just grow indoor house plants, but you can also grow lots of edibles, lots of herbs. So again, you're getting access to that sort of really sort of fragrant sensory side of things. So they're brilliant for windowsills. Microgreens also really good, and you can even get varieties, I think, like windowsill varieties of like tomatoes and things like that now, sort of really sort of dwarf varieties. So there's an awful lot of things that will sort of grow indoors. So I just say give it a go. And you get lots of lovely food as well if you're growing edibles. Herbs are always
you can eat them.
You can eat those. So definitely I try. I grow I have like quite a few house plants inside as well, so it's always good to sort of have those. And again, in the winter, because your time spent outdoors is a lot less, you've got the green inside, so it's sort of bringing a little bit of the outside in as well, which is always really good for your mental health.
And I think I literally cannot talk about this properly. You might be able to, but there also something that it puts something into the air. House plants actually put something into the air, which is also beneficial for your health.
So there's certain house plants basically purify the air around us, so they sort of clean the air. And snake plants, so that are known as mother-in-law's tongue, they're a really good one. Things like aloe vera as well, peace lilies. But there's quite a few, in all honesty. Then they sort of will purify the air. And some of the, I think is it snake plant that's also known to sort of reduce headaches as well. So there's a lot of them have got sort of antioxidant properties as well. There's one I can never pronounce it. It's Epipurum or something like that, is known to have anti cancer
Oh my goodness! Wow.
properties as well. So, sort of cancer fighting properties. So yeah, there's a lot of house plants. If you do your research, there's an awful lot of them that are really beneficial and that sort of help to aid sleep as well. So certain ones that you should have in your bedroom, certain ones that you should have in kitchens and bathrooms, like the humid plant, the ones that like the high humidity, like being in the bathrooms and stuff like that. But yeah, that there are certainly ones that sort of help to aid sleep and purify the air.
Oh wow!
So, yeah,
So it's incredible, really. So powerful.
I know, they're
You're
amazing. Really, plants are. Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah, no,
So,
and you're very knowledgeable. If anyone has listened to this, hasn't really thought about gardening before, or hasn't realised that it could actually do them an awful lot of good, particularly this week, it's the Mental Health Foundation who create this Mental Health Awareness Week, which is brilliant because it gets everyone talking like we are. And I give to a charity every term. I've chosen to give to that charity for this term. But for even with all the promotion around, if someone is in a position where they're not gardeners but they want to give it a shot, how would you encourage them to get started? And sort of what little tools could you give them that would make them feel the confidence to get going?
I would say start small. So start with something just like sowing seeds. Get yourself a packet of seeds, something that's relatively easy to grow. Sunflowers are always really good because they're very easy to grow, and they're very joyful plants to look at as well. So really, really pretty, really joyful. So I would say concentrate on doing that to begin with. Just start small and sow your seeds and concentrate on nurturing those seeds and looking after those seeds, and every day coming down, checking on the growth, and it sort of it encourages that sort of nurturing side of our nature. And I think all of a sudden sowing seeds is always a really good one because it's such a hopeful and joyful activity to do. All of a sudden it sort of becomes about the seed as well, so you sort of you're taking yourself out of that negative headspace, because all of a sudden actually you've got something there that you've got to look after, you're responsible for looking after. So it can really sort of help to sort of boost your confidence, and you get such a sense of achievement when you've grown something. So that sort of the positive feelings behind that is just such a joyful experience. So I'd say definitely start small, and don't be afraid to fail, because you will inevitably get failures along the way. So don't be afraid to fail, and don't be afraid to give it a go. Just get that packet of seeds, get a little pot, get some soil, and just get going. Don't be afraid to do that, and you'll soon realize that the benefits, if you keep doing it regularly. That's the other thing I'd say, do it little and often. I always sort of promote that, because I think it can become really overwhelming if you all of a sudden you go out into your garden. And I know I've done it. I've done it last year. I just got completely overwhelmed because you're thinking of the bigger picture, whereas actually now I go out with a specific task in mind. So I have a list and I think, right, I've got X amount of time. This is what I'm going to do in that time, because it's so easy to just go, oh, that needs doing and that needs doing, and then you sort of you distract, and you come away and you've not really completed anything. So little and often, I'd say. So the more you do it, the better you'll feel.
That's brilliant advice. You know what? That's advice for life.
Yeah,
isn't it? Because actually, when you make things into little bite size, and you actually then tick them off. The problem with our digital world is that you can sort of almost have a list on your phone and then you just delete it, and it's almost like it never even happened.
Yeah.
Whereas a bit of paper, a plan, a tick list, and then yes, I did that, at least reinforces to yourself, that I spent my time well and I achieved something. And you do really get that sort of sense of achievement instead of that sort of feeling of overwhelm. And essentially you're gardening to try and this is how I sort of see it, is that you're gardening to try and improve your mental health,
And that actually shouldn't be a stressful thing. You're doing it for fun. You're doing it as a way to sort of relieve the stress, and that shouldn't become a stress in itself. Otherwise, it sort of becomes counterproductive. And I sort of started thinking that last year. I was like, well, this is ridiculous. This is supposed to be helping me, not hindering me.
Yeah.
So I sort of made.
But amazing that you had the tools.
In the way I looked at it.
Yeah. And you recognized it in yourself. That's hard in itself. So you recognize that, and you made changes straight away. So that's brilliant.
Definitely.
And perhaps, you know, again, these are the tools that, as I say, can help your mental health non-gardening, because it's the same. You know, we all have a never-ending to-do list that is always going to be never-ending. It's not going to end. And so understanding that concept, and as you say, choosing the important things, the priorities, or the things that you're going to bring you joy, depending on what you need at that point, and then going through them and saying, yeah, I did that. And it's quite incredible, the list of things that you actually get through. And it's the same in the garden, where you've actually done quite a few more things potentially in the time than you realize, because you have spotted something and quickly done it. Definitely. Yeah, applauding yourself is always important.
It is amazing what you can get done in a short space of time if you just got like a plan and you stick to it. And be quite. I think it's important to be quite realistic about what you think you can achieve. That was my other big thing. I'm terrible for underestimating how long things are going to actually take me. So I was like, right, I'll get this done.
Lucy, aren't we all? Aren't we all?
Yes. And then you don't get it done, and then there's that sort of feeling of frustration. So I think I've certainly this year got better at sort of thinking, no, I'm not going to put too much on that list. You know, what do I want to achieve? What are the priorities for this gardening session? And then just choosing one or two things depending on how much time you've got.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It's absolutely spot on, and I feel very inspired. And not just about my gardening, about everything, about the way that we see life and our tasks and so on. It's, you know, it is true. It's very representative. So thank you so much for coming and chatting to me today, for reaching out in the first place. Love meeting you people. You've got a brilliant story to share, and you're inspiring loads and loads of people, and this conversation, I hope, will encourage even more to give it a go, or to see the way that gardening is in their life, to really appreciate what it's doing for them, so they can really hone in on that.
Absolutely. And what I would say as well is, anybody that is sort of thinking of trying it for the first time, is don't be afraid to ask for help. If there's something you're not sure about, you know, just reach out to somebody. My DMs are always open if anybody's got any gardening questions and they want to know how to do certain things. So there's no such thing as a silly question in gardening. I'm still asking questions 15 years on, you know, because things do change. So certainly always, you know, don't be afraid to ask for help on how to do something.
And being curious means you keep learning, and you progress, and you can then see your own progression, and like you say, you've sort of increased in your knowledge in the National Trust sphere, because now you're also teaching others, and that's hugely beneficial as well. To actually be able to demonstrate your knowledge is great for your self-confidence, because you realize that you've got something to share and to give.
Definitely. And I'm still learning myself as well. You learn new things all the time in gardening, so you never stop learning.
Lifelong learner, that's the aim, isn't it?
That's exactly
it. All right, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and if you have, you can help by doing 3 things. First, press the follow button to tell podcast platforms you want to listen again. Second, please give the show a 5-star rating and leave a review about why you liked it. And third, I'd love you to share it with friends and family, or on your socials, for which I am truly thankful. Finally, if this podcast is making you want to start reclaiming your own movement, Join me in the Reclaim Movement membership for classes, both live and by replay, and countless videos of mini movement breaks to add into your daily life, covering practical and fun, important natural movements. Visit reclaimmovement.co.uk/membership to get started with your 7-day free trial. See you for the next episode, and thank you so much for listening.